and spent all night on trial before the high priest, and being beaten up by soldiers, Jesus was tied up and led through the hustle and bustle of the city streets and taken to the place where Pilate was staying for the festival. Jesus was led into Pilate's presence without looking him up and down. His hands were tied, and his face was bruised and swollen from the beating he had for the temple guards. He could see people had been spitting on him. "So," he said with a sneer in his voice, "you are this king I've been hearing about, are you?" "So you say," said Jesus. The chief priests leaped out in at once with their accusations. Pilate expected Jesus to defend himself, but he didn't. "Have you nothing to say?" Pilate asked angrily. "Look at all the charges they are bringing against you." Jesus remained silent. Pilate was astonished. "Well, we'll have to see what the crowd thinks, won't we?" he said. They were in an upstairs room, overlooking a large courtyard at the front of the palace. The courtyard was full of people. Pilate looked down on them, and all had nothing but disgust for them, but he was afraid of them. If some of them were supporters of this Jesus, then things could turn very nasty when he sentenced him to death. But he had an idea. There was a man under guard in the palace named Barabbas. He was the leader of a dangerous and rebellious group who was notorious Jewish terrorists. He was responsible for the death of a number of Roman soldiers, and he was waiting to be crucified after the festival had finished. He had been tortured by the guard. He wasn't going to cause any more trouble, nor would his followers. The crowd didn't know this, but Pilate did, and it was a risk worth taking. He often released one of his prisoners at Passover to keep the crowds happy, so he'd give them a choice: Barabbas or Jesus. He gave orders for both men to be brought out, and he asked the crowd who to release. "Barabbas!" they cried. The police had done their job for Pilate, so he asked, "What shall I do with this king?" "Crucify him," they yelled. Pilate asked them, "What's he done wrong?" But the crowds kept shouting, "Crucify him." "Very well," Pilate said, and he handed Jesus over to the guards to be crucified. The guards led Jesus back inside and dressed him in a purple robe just like a king, and forced a crown made of thorns onto his head. They mocked him, kneeling in front of him, saying, "Hail, King of Jews!" They beat him, then dressed him back in his normal clothes, and led him through the streets to be crucified. Even though he was weak from the beating, they forced Jesus to carry his heavy cross to the place of execution, but he was too weak and collapsed under the weight of it. At that moment, a Jew, Simon from the city of Cyrene, happened to be passing by. They forced him to carry the cross instead, whilst Jesus was surrounded by guards being mocked and abused by the crowds. They came to a place outside the city walls called Golgotha, or the place of the skull. The soldiers stripped him naked, then crucified him, nailing him to the cross and pulling him up with ropes. They fixed to the top of the cross a sign saying, "The King of Jews," and there he hung to all to see. "Father, forgive them," Jesus said. "They don't know what they are doing." It was noisy. People had come from miles around to see the execution. They were yelling abuse, saying, "He saved others, but he can't save himself." 3 hours passed, and there Jesus hung. It was noon. It was meant to be the brightest part of the day, but the sky suddenly felt dark, as if the whole of creation was in mourning. 3 hours passed. Most of Jesus' friends had deserted him. Even God had abandoned him. Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Father, I place my life in your hands." And then he died. At that very moment, the great curtain in the temple, separating the Holy of Holies from the sanctuary, tore in two, from top to bottom, and the centurion at the foot of the cross said, "Surely this was God's Son."